So my next guest is an incredible woman. Her name is Baratang Miya. She's the CEO and founder of GirlHype. She's a social entrepreneur. She's passionate about tech. And it's an absolute pleasure to have you. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
So it's interesting because I have family all over the country. Yeah. And when I see areas or towns that I'm familiar with, I get excited. So you were born in Klerksdorp.
Yep.
Where in Klerksdorp exactly?
Matlosan.
You see what I mean? Because I've got family there as well. And it's interesting because as much as I didn't grow up there, but I would imagine that life was a certain way, depending on which time in the country we were growing up. So what was it like growing up in Matlosana, and what were you exposed to, you know, as a young person?
Politics. So I grew up at the time of where the youth of South Africa, we were really tired of what was happening in terms of apartheid, and we were fighting it. And I think when I got to high school, sometimes I go to school and there's guns everywhere because it was like hectic. Some of my friends did not get to finish school because they had to fight for this country. So for me, I always say to people, I don't know how to be normal without fighting for my rights, because that's all I knew as a child.
It's actually very powerful you say that, because a lot of what you do is driven by passion and by desire to change things. But we'll talk about that. So nowadays, there's so much that inspires a lot of young people. And it's found on social media. There are a lot more influential people that we're exposed to. But what were you sort of inspired by then? And what did you actually want to become? What were your dreams?
I wanted to become a lawyer, and it never materialized.
Why?
It's a funny story. So when I finished school, I had a gap of 2 years where I wasn't doing anything. And I got creative. So in the process, I fell pregnant. But I was applying for all these programs, and I applied to be a prosecutor. Now, in the forms, it said you shouldn't have a child. That was like 1992.
Really?
Yeah. It said you shouldn't have a child. But I insisted, because I didn't know I'm pregnant. I applied, and applications went. I went for the interviews. I did everything. But part of the program is that they have to fit the gowns, because you had to fit on the gown. You're going to be a prosecutor training in Pretoria, and they sent you to university. And when I went for the fitting, this prosecutor that was so excited for me to go looked at me, you know, like the gown was not fitting properly. And he said to me, "Are you pregnant?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "No, Sissy, you can't go to Pretoria with a baby in your tummy. If there was no baby in your tummy, I could even write you don't have a child, because you're really qualified." That was it.
I mean, how did that make you feel? Considering, I mean, I would like to think it's somehow limited your access to opportunity. How did it make you feel?
I think I blamed myself for a very long time. It created the hate for what I had done. Like, I felt like I had done something wrong, and I messed up my whole future because of having a child. I were to learn when I was at university that it was not my fault, it was the system. And that's what pushed me into doing a lot of feminism work, because I realized that I was denied an opportunity. I mean, some of the boys, we were all coming from the same schools, we were applying for different programs. Some had babies, but they managed to join the program and finish. And purely because there was no way you can prove that they are fathers. But with me, it's on the system. It's either I'm a mom somewhere, it's registered somewhere, or I'm carrying the baby myself. So I just felt like the system is a bit unfair to certain genders.
I mean, with everything you've gone through, the opportunities you were denied, at some point you must have had an aha moment where you perhaps realized that something needs to change, or this is the direction that I need to take. What was that moment for you?
The gap that I took before I've gone to university. So after that, I then started to start a business. I went into interior designing, I learned, and I started the business, which lasted for 7 years, and I went to UCT. So when I got to university, life was totally different. I had been away from the education system for 7 years. I had gone to a township school. English, I think I learned it from TV, because my teachers used to teach in
I hope it's not the
Tswana.
soapies. Is it the soapies?
Yeah, it's the soapies. Days of our lives. So I somehow could put string sentences together, and I was comfortable with myself. And then I get then everything is totally unique. It's as if I'm in a foreign world. I used to joke about it and say it was as if somebody took me from Klerksdorp and dumped me in London, and I was like, "What is this?"
Sure.
And because I was very conscious about the fact that we never had same opportunities, I there and then made a decision that when I finished this university, nobody should go through what I went through. And I knew that it's still the same for my cousins, my brothers, children till this day. If you go to township school, the education is not right. There's so much imbalance in our country.
So, I mean, it is quite clear that you had to overcome all of this somehow. And there are a lot of people, a lot of South Africans who have gone through a similar thing. We all have different challenges. So what is the key in overcoming some of these disadvantages and, lack of access that you experienced? I mean, you speak about language, you speak about all these other things. What is the key in overcoming that?
There's two things happening in the education system.
Sure.
It's language, and also technology was beginning to pick up. And I chose to use technology to accelerate education. And I then decided, with tech, once you know it, it just gives you that superpower.
That tech is somewhat of an equalizer.
For me, it's an equalizer. And if you don't get it at the right time, you will never catch up. If I get a remote job, it's virtual. Nobody knows. It's because they know me with relations. But I can go online and just create a persona and work, and nobody will ever question me as long as I deliver. For me, it's one of the best equalizer I would ever find in this world.
That is such a powerful thing. But then somewhere along the line, coding came into your life. And you've mentioned technology quite a lot. So at what point did coding become something of interest to you, to the extent where today it's part of what you do to empower many other young women out there?
I think being at an institution like UCT exposed you to a lot. When I was at university, I had seen a code. And what they were doing there really triggered my mind. Coding has this thing, if you've seen it and you connect with it, you can never leave it. It's just one of those, it's a language. It's one of those language you want to master. You want to know where the comma goes, where what goes, how to structure it, those algorithms. It's something that fascinates me. But I had seen it before, and I never did anything with it. And then I started GirlHype to teach young people, girls, how to use computers with Microsoft PowerPoint and all that. 2 years into it, that was 2003. 2 years into it, somebody said to me, "Why don't you design a website?" He taught me how to design a website on front page. Within 1 hour, I had designed the website.
Wow.
And that moment, I can still feel it. That moment when I published the website, I decided this is what I'm going to teach the girls. I changed the whole thing. I didn't know the word code because I found something that I could do that was totally different from my world. I think I've always said it just gave me that power moment of, wow.
What I like about what you're saying is that it speaks to what being a challenger is all about, or a maverick, where you don't always have to stick to what's conventional, even in your own personal situation. From what you've studied to what you were doing for 7 years and doing something completely different. I mean, is that not a scary thing? I mean, I know hopping into a different environment, even a different type of outfit that I don't normally wear, I mean, that terrifies me. So what was it like with you when you jumped into the space?
I don't have that thing. That you can't do it. I just do. With how I grew up bouncing from different parents and different families because my mom was a domestic worker. So my great-grandmother raised me first, and then my grandmother, and then my mother. So I was around women who are very powerful in their own element. Also growing up at that time in South Africa where you just had to do it. If you don't do it, nobody will do it for you. That element of you can't do that, I just don't live by. I'd rather fail than sitting there and wallowing.
How do you take failure? Do you have any stories, experiences that come to mind where things didn't work out?
Failing is like iteration. You have to fail over and over and over and over. If you iterate it all the time, you get to a point where you're like, oh, it's fine. Another bus is coming. And when it happened, so if I go backwards and I say, when I failed because I did not qualify to be a lawyer because I had a baby, that was very personal to me. It's about me. Then I collapse, I cry. Like it's one of those moments where I feel like, whew, I have really failed. But if my business fails, it's just an iteration.
So then what motivates you to start again? Because if you look at the work that GirlHype does, you know, a lot of great work with women, young women, getting them into the space of coding. And I mean, surely you must have had some sort of motivation. What was that motivation to start again or to try again?
It's because I don't know anything else. Look, when you become an entrepreneur, you get addicted. And if you've been in business for long enough, failed and succeed and fail and succeed, you become addicted to that feeling. So it's not like I've never worked. So if GirlHype fails like decimal, it's done that many times sometimes, where it doesn't bring cash at all, there's no income, then I'll find a job. And the job is just to balance what I'll do at work. And I don't find that happiness. But it's never a fulfilling moment like seeing a girl learning how to code or someone getting into university and saying, I'm going to study computer science. And because I've been in tech and I know you can crawl, it's an industry that really strips you. You walk naked because it's so technical. It's very male-dominated. And if you're in Cape Town like me, it's not just male, it's white males. And they have it loud, they have it leak, they talk their way.
And that's the thing, is that you've got to, you know, sometimes be radical if you want to see change. And you're dealing with people sometimes, in this particular case, men who are so comfortable in their space, in their dominance, that anything else seems to be disruptive. Now, you're a strong woman, and you have your organization that you've even pointed out doesn't always bring you money. But you're doing the work. So you are teaching a lot of young women to go out there and do what they need to do in tech. But who was that person for you? Who mentored you? Who taught you in many different ways?
I can't point at one particular person, but I think my grandmother, my mother's mother, was a very strong woman. And she never gave up on anything. I grew up around people like Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, Winnie Mandela. There were lots of women around us who were so powerful. They were leading the struggle with their husbands in jail. So I'm not a generation that didn't see powerful women. I saw them.
So you've obviously taken from different women. So when you look at GirlHype, outside of the coding and the technical stuff, what else do you teach young girls about being an entrepreneur? How do you say to someone that, you know, I'm doing this, but I'm not really making money from it, and expect them to find it inspirational? Because we always say that everything you do, there needs to be some sort of financial reward. You've given a completely different account. So what sort of, you know, lessons do you give, you know, the young women that you work with?
I always say to them that they need to live their truth. So part of what GirlHype does is employ people who are unemployed, but they are graduates or they finished high school. I went back to my community and I employed those girls. You know, I'm paying it forward. I'm not doing it for myself. If they cannot see me and if I don't become that voice, they will never be the voice. It might not be monetary value that I get, but I get lots of other things. I got to travel Silicon Valley.
Yes, let's actually talk about that. So what was that like?
It was mind-blowing. That was 2015. I didn't know anything about big data at the time. I had just been teaching a small group of girls how to code. And then I get into this world where, look, I had seen the Google app on my phone, my Gmail. And I get to walk Google, and I get to speak with the engineers and the designers, the software engineers
and you're like,
at
so
Google.
This is
and
you
I'm
guys.
like,
This
okay,
is you guys.
So next to it, they're all in the same space. You just walk around in Palo Alto and you see there's Facebook, you see the visibility. And we're still not there, not even an inch of what you see when you walk Silicon Valley, and the mentality of collaboration, changing systems. It was mind-blowing, like a mind shift change. I had, like that time I was 2015, I was 13 years into GirlHype, 2003. I was 12 years into GirlHype. And every day of my life, I believe that's where I belong. A small room with 30 girls, teaching them how to code, and then they finish, and then we get to another 20 or 40, and then we teach little. And I had, you know, I looked at myself so small, like I don't exist.
And now, how do you see yourself now? Has the
No, it's
the
changed.
perception changed?
I think I'm the most powerful person because when I look back, I can point 300,000 girls that know something that they could have never touched.
That's beautiful.
Because I grew up in that township.
Hmm.
I can still go back to that child and be inspired by lack of, I don't know what I'm going to eat tonight. I don't have clothes that my neighbor has. I don't have the best education because some child in the community, because they go on a taxi every morning with their mom and they come back speaking posh English and the windows are big and they think they're better. I know that feeling. So I tap onto it and I inspire these girls that you can do it. So if I stop, who else is
Exactly.
gonna do it?
And you've got to keep it going. And I think the next thing becomes, with everything you've experienced, what is your next? And is it bigger than the organization? Is it the organization?
I've already tapped into my next. I work a lot with, in terms of policy, ICT policy going forward. I'm part of Black IT Forum. We promoting, in terms of policy, when South Africa is releasing new policy, like now, there's 5G going out, the questionnaire from ICASA and all these procurement bills and what, we contribute to that, and I lead that part of the portfolio. If policy changes today, like now we are creating norms and global norms and standards. I was part of the We the Internet group. So it's a global movement. We helped the UN to write the norms and standards and policy for the new internet governance, how internet is going to be governed globally. We can only recommend, because these corporates are like giants, we can only recommend standards that all of them can form so that they become more human than AI. They become more human than algorithms and profit-driven. We're trying to do the balance, the power balance between tech and humanity.
I mean, everything you've said is powerful. And I mean, I don't even know in a year's time or 2 years' time where you'll be. But one of the other things that we've seen in the last year at least is the advent of COVID-19. I don't know what sort of impact that has had on your organization or even the work you do. I mean, when you reflect on what's been happening over the last 12 odd months up to this point, emotionally, from an entrepreneurial point of view, and just even psychologically, what do you say as you reflect on what's been happening?
It's a terrible thing, but COVID really highlighted the injustices of the world. And for me as a person, when it started, like when we were on level 5 as a country, I was more concerned about my own child, because I have a child who goes to one of the most good schools. It's like, really, I'm paying a lot of money for her to be there. And she has an Apple at home. She's got a good phone, and we live on the Apple world. We like pay a lot of money to that company to make sure we are connected all the time. But when it started, the teachers in those schools did not know how to manage it. And then looking at the transition from me being as technical as I am, having worked in the industry, not knowing how to teach this child at home. Homeschooling was new to her. Google Meet was new to her. Everything was just so technical for her. The first 3 weeks was just me. It was all of us adjusting, reshuffling. And now I have access to internet all the time. But you know what happened? When the country there was no enough spectrum in the country. When all that happened, internet pulled everybody, companies, corporates, good schools, they pulled a lot of internet. Now, what did that mean? My nephew who lives in Jan Kemdorp didn't have internet because it needed a strong broadband to pull it. So that for me was like, finally, somebody hears what I've been saying all these years, that we all need to be technical. It's the world is changing and it's getting there. I always say it's not about learning how to code or knowing how to be technical, or it's inclusiveness, it's equality. The power that technology has, it's proven. If you bring tech into a country, it just increases its GDP like pew. The skills in that country just changes. The education level just changes. We're not saying children must be looking at screens. We're just saying that when you bring technical knowledge, it's just going to improve the country.
It's a game changer.
It's a game changer.
And I suppose that leads me to the other thing I want to talk to you about is the challenges that we face in society, some of which you might have alluded to, but your own challenge that you've seen that you want to change, a societal challenge that you've observed that gives you sleepless nights, that makes you think, on what to do about it and what to do about it. What is that for you?
As digital literacy, we are at a point in time in our lives where we cannot say we can't use computers or tech or anything. We are at a point in our life where we can't be debating whether it should be 5G or 4G or what. If we're not part of it, we're going to be excluded. It's how we get there that's important. But now when we get there, like people who speak about policies and tech and are doing all this knowledge and skills, in South Africa, we are excluding like 70% of the population in that. Now, for me, what makes me not sleep is seeing history being repeated itself in a different form. In the past, it had a name. We could point at it and say, it's apartheid, or it's injustice against people of color. Now, it's not tangible because it's education, it's access, it's information. The more knowledge you have, the more information you have, the better opportunities and chances of you living. And when I go home, like literally it breaks my heart to see young girls not knowing how to apply for university, not having access to just one computer, even if there's like 10 of them, having access to a computer and internet to just be able to read. It's just, we need to improve our digital literacy. We need to get our girls to be educated. They cannot be encouraged to play with dolls and be cleaners and plan marriages. It's fine. It's part of the society. We know it's going to happen. That's, nature took care of that. You're going to get to a point where you fall in love and you get married and it doesn't need to be pushed into your head. And I think the society needs to shift and realize that we need to compete globally. And that we can only do by educating and opening opportunities to our people. You know what I always say? South Africa has too many problems, and problems create opportunities and business opportunities. So if you don't solve our own problems, somebody's going to come back in South Africa and go to Jan Kempdorp, where my nephew lives, and say, guys, I can put a tower here for you, which is very cheap. I can put a tower here for you, and they're going to idolize the person. Our government can just spend 150,000, put a tower, and make sure that people are on the internet. It's injustice. It's against human rights. It's being, like literally, it's like denying people access to life. How do you choose who you want to educate, where you want to put a tower, where you want to put that, just because people cannot afford it? When you've excluded people, generations of people, we're doing the same thing. We're not saying to people, start here and then compete there. When you've had nothing in your life, it's tough. These kids that we have today, it's COVID, you see? All these multiracial schools that are popping up with the best tech, the best app. Every software that's been designed, it's designed for people who have knowledge, people who can write, people who can read. 70% of South Africans cannot do that. And we are sitting here today and say, it's not. It's human rights. We are literally stamping on people. 16 years, 17 years, 20 years. We'll be having another Baratang sitting here saying, there was an injustice that happened and our government did nothing. We really have to change it.
We can talk about policy and government, but, there's also the private sector. And I think they have a massive obligation to the people of whatever country they happen to be in. So what role can the private sector play in bringing about change, the change you speak of, whether it's in Klerksdorp or anywhere else?
In high schools, it takes, we've done the calculations. I work with a school principal, and we've done the calculations. It's 14,000 rand to educate a child in a township. Every day, like, you give them meals, you give them lunch, you get them tutors, you teach them tech, they get the best. It's 14,000. That's inclusive of everything I would do and the school would do, like a combination. This is a tech school. So me and the principal had our own project. And then we excluded that, and I said, how much will it cost if you was just to teach one child how to code every day? With inclusive, everything with the school having their computer lab, you give us nicer internet, it's not even more than 5,000. So if you want to change somebody's life, there's a woman, when I went to Silicon Valley, I asked one woman, can you please take care of this child whilst I'm gone? She paid her. So for the whole year, she was paying her 2,500 a month, which she compiled it, and because her donations was showing, and I gave her a certificate. When I gave her a certificate, she said, you know, I've empowered somebody. Now that person is a facilitator at GirlHype. She's worked in the IT industry. She mastered Microsoft. And she said it didn't cost me more than 15,000 to employ someone, change their life, and make them a better person.
You've spoken a lot about the things you've done. I feel, just based on your story, there's a lot you've mastered. But there's more to master. What is that for you?
Now my interest is more in tech. How can tech change the health system? So I'm more into biosciences. I spend a lot of time with such people. I literally changed my gym membership. I go to like Body 20. They do biotech, plug things onto your body and analyze what fits. So I'm more now getting more interested in us, my physical body. Health needs to be simplified, that it's so palatable. No, it's simple for people. Like coding is very simple. I can teach anybody how to code. I mean, I believe it's simple. But when I speak about health, wellness, and tech, that's the biggest tech industry. I don't know how to approach it. It's a bit scary. No.
You're an extraordinary woman. You're a power woman. Your story, your history, your challenges, everything that you've gone through, planned and unplanned, is an incredible life story. And it's not just a story about a powerful woman, it's a great human story. And I think it's going to inspire a lot of people, both men and women. But I know that there are a lot of women out there who look up to you, who look up to the story that you have given today. So thank you so much for doing that. Thank you so much for doing it with all honesty, because that's what we need more of, all honesty. So I'm looking forward to this journey, right, as we challenge the different things out there. And I'm glad that you found a passion, and I'm glad that you eloquently put what you think that challenge is. So I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thanks to Glenfiddich, because I work with young people sometimes. And when I was called to do the campaign, I felt like, what a movement. It's change, it's shifting minds, because it shows that something is being done for somebody. Appreciate what I'm doing. A big brand like this saying, hey, let's talk, even if I'm working with people that I assume they might not benefit from. I felt like we're recognized, and it means a lot to me, I think. It's given me an exposure, and it's one of the biggest things I can ever have.